It has been a wild week in the NHL with the Oilers trying to make a comeback in the Stanley Cup final as other teams start making pre-draft deals. Plus, there's some new looks around the league, all on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want, when you want to. Locked On listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Gil, we are in a very different position than we were a week ago. I was looking at our outline for last week's show. Panthers were up 3-0, and it was a foregone conclusion, or so we thought, what the outcome might be. I think, I did pick the Panthers in either 5 or 7 and not 6. So I think, my prediction could still come true at this point. But because I really felt strongly that if the Oilers took them to 6 games, they would win at home in that game,
right.
In that game 6. But we're looking at the eventuality. Game 6 is tonight. Game 7 would be on Monday back in Florida. Are they panicked now? And are the Oilers so confident right now that they can actually win this thing?
I don't think Florida is panicked, but I do think Edmonton is confident. The one thing about Florida, you've got a lot of players on that roster who have all gone through some tough times in their careers, who have bounced back from slumps, off years, off ice controversies, injuries, whatever the case may be. They still understand they need one game to win the Stanley Cup. But boy, oh boy, if it goes back to Florida for Game 7, the pressure is certainly more on the Panthers than it would be on the Oilers. And to become the first team to lose a Stanley Cup final after being up 3-0, I think would be an incredible shadow hanging over the heads of all the players of the Florida Panthers for the rest of their lives. It would be like, yeah, oh, you were on that team? I mean, there would be a certain, historical negativity associated with that.
Absolutely. And I think, when you have the reputation of being the comeback cats,
right,
to be in the position of being the favored team and to go out to that lead, I mean, it kind of does make sense that at some point it's going to be too much and that's going to crumble a little bit. And that's what we've seen so far in these last couple of games where, the goaltending doesn't look as strong as it's been. And that system, that defensive system that we talked about last week isn't working as well because McDavid, frankly, on his own to some degree, has taken it to a new level.
Well, in sports, and hockey is part of that, it's a chess match. So Florida comes out with this defense and it works for a few games, and then Edmonton makes an adjustment and McDavid does McDavid things. Now it's Florida's turn to adjust back and figure out a different approach maybe to slowing down McDavid and the rest of that Edmonton attack. So the chess match goes on. The downside of it for the Florida Panthers is Game 6, Edmonton has the last change. So that makes it a little tougher to get the matchups that you want if you're the Florida Panthers. And it's interesting. You mentioned your prediction. My prediction originally was Panthers in 7, but I had said, Florida, because they're the deeper team, will wear down Edmonton. Well, it's been the opposite of that. So
Right.
I may get the pick right, but with the wrong analysis. So we'll see how that goes. But I still think Florida will win the series. But am I as confident as I was even a day or two ago? Absolutely not.
But do you think it still happens in 7? Do you think
I
Edmonton wins
do.
tonight?
I do think it goes to 7, and then I think back in Florida. But you know that building, the tension in that building, if it goes to 7, wow. I mean, wow.
Yeah, I do know somebody that will be in the building tonight, and I do not envy them at all. I don't know if I could handle it. I think that it's a lot of pressure on this Edmonton team as well. I mean, I think to some degree they're playing with house money because they were
Right.
down 3-0, so they've got nothing to lose, right? And I think that even if they lose the series, to show that they had some fire and tried to come back, I think that's respectable, right? And I know that you look at a team that has the greatest player in the world on it, and looking at a loss in a Stanley Cup final could seem negative. But looking at how this series has gone, I think regardless of what happens tonight or a potential game 7, you got to hold your head up high, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. No question about that. And one of the keys, I think, and one of the big differences between the first 3 games and the last 2, you mentioned McDavid going off and doing McDavid things, but Sergei Bobrovsky, he is an excellent goalie, but there are times when he looks all worldly, and there are times when he looks
Yep.
good, but not great. And the last 2 games, we have not seen the A-level Sergei Bobrovsky. They need one more game, Florida does, of A-level Sergei Bobrovsky to win the Cup.
Yeah, and I think he is very capable of that. And if you look at the percentages of his A games versus maybe a B plus game for him, the A games outweigh those weaker
Yes.
games. So in theory, he should be back on track, but it could also be difficult to do that on the road. Now I know the Panthers have had success on the road, so it's not like something that's a foregone conclusion, but I do think that like this is make it or break it for Bobrovsky for sure. And I do think that the greater amount of pressure in game 6 is absolutely on the Panthers here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I also wonder, you talk about Bobrovsky's good games outweighing his pretty good games, but does he have the emotional fortitude to do that with the Stanley Cup on the line? It's not,
We don't
in the
know.
middle of
He's
February.
untested. I mean, most people are untested
Right.
on that
Right.
level, right? So you just don't know.
You just don't know. But this is not, a mid-February Tuesday night game, with if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. This is the Stanley Cup is on the line, and with 32 teams in the league, you may not get another chance ever to be this close to winning a Stanley Cup. You've got to come through in one of these next 2 games if you're Sergei Bobrovsky, or you may never get another chance at winning the Stanley Cup because you were in the final last year. And to blow it 2 years in a row would be, I think, a very devastating thing for him and for the Florida Panthers organization.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be a really fun game. I know that for sure. And I'm very much looking forward to watching it. I think that it's one of those things where you look around the league and you absolutely think, yeah, these are the right teams to have gotten there. And wow, how great would it be for this to get to a game 7, which again, a week ago, we would not have thought.
Right. Right. But hey, game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, to me, there's nothing like it. And if that game goes to overtime, wow. I mean, don't take my blood pressure during that.
Right. And I think I personally wanted to go to game 7, not just because of my prediction, but because it's more fun that way. But I do know it's been dragged out because of the schedule. We know that it'll be right up against the draft, which starts next week. And I just think like we deserve this. We deserve a game 7. So I'm rooting for the Oilers, but then, whatever happens, happens at that point.
I would love a game 7. And look, it's more hockey. It's one more game. It's 3 more days of the season. So to me, the excitement of a game 7 would be absolutely worth the price of admission. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And, the rest of the NHL is waiting impatiently, I would
Yes.
say, based on the activities of this past week with some trades and some signings. And we're going to get into some of those as well as the rumors that are still out on the table coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Ultimate Hockey GM. Hockey fans, I want to take a moment to bring you up on one of our partners, the mobile game, Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think that you could run the team better than your team's current GM? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. Hockey fans, there is no off-season. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to try to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you're going to love this game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store, so make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today.
So, looking back a little bit at this past week, of course, the rest of the league is getting busy preparing for the draft and doing any pre draft signings and trades in order to get their ducks in a row and, maybe trying to move up in the draft, maybe wanting to dump some cap. And I think there's a lot of that going around. Our colleagues on the other shows have talked a lot about the PLD trade for Darcy Kemper. We talked earlier in the week about the Markstrom deal to the New Jersey Devils, and those were pretty big. I think, one surprising deal that hasn't gotten talked about is a signing, and that's Nedeljkovic going back to the Pens on a 2-year, $5 million contract.
Yeah, and I think that makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, he's 28 years old, still in his prime, started 33 games this past year. Wasn't outstanding, 902 save percentage, a 297 goals against average, but he seems to fit in well in Pittsburgh, and the Penguins, securing their top 2 goalies now for the upcoming season. And obviously they need that little extra boost to get back into the playoffs, having just missed for the second year in a row. Certainly not something the Penguins are accustomed to, but they feel like Nedeljkovic can be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Yeah, I think that's really it. And it is interesting because, I don't know that the Pens fan base expected that per se. I think that maybe they thought they would look more in the open market for somebody else. But I think looking at what's available, maybe they just decided that was the best option.
Yeah, it's not a great year for free agency as far as goaltenders go, so you'd have to make a trade. And I think also with backup goaltending, you're looking at a couple of factors. You want a reliable backup, somebody who, if he is only playing 1 game a week, will still be sharp and be able to play. And I think maybe even more importantly, you want to have somebody where if your top goalie is slumping or injured, he can play, 3, 4, 5 games in a row and take over as the starter, at least for the short term. And I guess, given the options, Nedeljkovic was the best option in the mind of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, I guess so. And in the meantime, there are some other rumors floating around related to the draft and potential trades. And, my Philadelphia Flyers were involved in 2 of those rumors that were going around. There was something that actually we had talked about on Locked On Flyers prior to the rumors going out there when we were talking about the San Jose Sharks, that Cam Atkinson to the Sharks might be a good option if he was willing to waive that no trade clause, which apparently he is not. So that kind of put the kibosh on that a little bit. But the other one was a potential deal with the Ottawa Senators. Now, there wasn't any details out there about exactly who it was for. Is it a Chikrin situation? Is it trading Travis Konechny to get, a higher draft pick in return for the Flyers to get into that top 10? There were so many different options being floated around. Scott Lawton to their, to the Senators, all of this. And both sides have said, no, nothing to see here. But we know what it means sometimes when GMs say nothing to see here. That means there's absolutely something to see.
Yeah, it means we don't want to talk about it. That's what it means. We don't want to endanger the negotiations by commenting on them. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. It's interesting because we had that little flurry of activity earlier this week. Usually teams wait until the Stanley Cup final is over. The league prefers that. And yet I think once it was 3-0, when it started to get 3-1, 3-2, they were like, no, we're going to make these announcements now. We're not waiting any longer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what happened. And I understand wanting to do that. And, if you have the opportunity to make a deal that you think is good for your team, just get it done.
Yeah. Just cross the T's and dot the I's and submit to the league office.
Yeah, we've talked about goaltending a little bit, and I think one of the biggest questions this offseason is where Linus Ullmark is going to wind up. I honestly could not tell you at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There are a lot of rumors out of Ottawa that the Senators are very interested in Linus Ullmark, and yet would the Bruins trade him within the division? I think that becomes a big question as well.
I think so, but also if that's what they want and they're willing to pay more for it, go ahead. I think that's kind of how you have to look at it. If it's an offer that the Bruins can't refuse, like I don't see any problem with that at all. One of the other goaltenders is Elvis Merzlikins. And, it hasn't been great in Columbus there with that situation, but also it's kind of difficult to trade him at this point.
Yeah, Don Waddell basically saying that he doesn't think anybody would take on that contract. He may very well be right, and maybe Columbus is just not looking to retain any salary. Either they're going to let him play or they're going to move all of his salary. So, it could also just be talk to try to get teams to up their ante. So at this point in the year, you have to sort of read between the lines, and it's not clear exactly what is meant by, his statement that they'll keep him unless, somebody is willing to take on that contract.
Yeah, I think so. And it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, because there are other teams that need goaltenders too.
Yes.
And will they try and create a bidding war? Because I think that's, the best way for the Bruins to approach it. But, they're also on a clock here in terms of making sure that, teams know what they're doing prior to free agency, trying to get a trade done.
Yeah, and when you think about it, you got to give the New Jersey Devils even more credit for striking early and taking themselves out of that bidding war and getting a deal done before anybody else.
Yeah, I think so. One of the other topics out there is the draft, as we are a week away, and our team's trying to move up into that top 10 in a very strong draft, especially for defensemen. But, the Sabres have the 11th overall pick, so just outside that top 10. seem to be willing to trade it. And first off, I wonder why, because of the depth of this draft, but maybe they feel like they need to get something in return that's a big payday for them.
Maybe. And I think it also could be this, the Sabres have been considered over the last couple of years that young and up and coming team that's going to make the jump from out of the playoffs to in the playoffs. And the last 2-3 years, they've disappointed every year. Maybe they're looking for some more immediate help. Maybe they want that player who they don't have to wait 2 or 3 years for them to develop and become a good player. They want someone they could plug in now and make that jump and finally end that long playoff drought.
Who knows at this point, but I do think it would be an interesting move for the Sabres to make. And of course, we have the ubiquitous Patrick Laine situation. Where's he going to end up? I think Patrick Laine and Pierre-Luc Dubois should have like a "we don't belong anywhere" club. But, it's been a wild career for the two of them, trying to find a good home.
Chemistry. Yeah, exactly. Does not get along well with others. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, we will continue to cover those rumors, signings, and trades over the course of the next week on Locked On NHL, leading up to the draft next week. In the meantime, there are some new looks coming around the league, and we are going to talk about them coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. With superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts, for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So in the fashion department of the NHL, the Kings released their new old logo and jerseys to go along with it this week. And I think it was the right move, kind of going back to that Gretzky era Kings logo more permanently. But what did you think about that?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I am a little bit of a traditionalist in some respects. I still miss the purple and gold original Kings jerseys. Those were great, and they are bringing back that logo as a secondary logo. So, I like that little touch. But yeah, I kind of like the throwback to the Gretzky era. That was a very good time for the LA Kings.
Yeah, I think so. I think, it was definitely the right move. I do think they're going to have the purple and gold look for third jerseys and special occasions, which they've done. And I think that's the right way to do it, is use that sporadically. The only thing I will say about the updated Kings logo is I don't know if the fonts match the original font exactly, but there's something off to me about this new font, that it's a little rounded, like it needs to be more block, if that makes any sense.
It does. But yeah, I mean, I guess they wanted to be a little bit different, not 100% going back to the way it was, but they want to pay homage to the way it was. And I think overall that's the reason they did it. But I agree with you. I think it would look better the other way.
Yeah, it just doesn't look like a distinct font. It looks more like a boilerplate font.
Yeah.
That you could recreate on your own computer without, having a million different fonts to choose from. So I think that's really the one little ding I will give them. But I absolutely think it was a good thing to do to go back to that style and that design. Their friends down the road, the Ducks, are in theory announcing new jerseys this year that are also kind of throwback, looking back at their Mighty Duck era and going to that as their kind of permanent logo, but in the more modern colors with the kind of rusty orange and black and gold look.
Yeah, I mean, the color combination I like, and look, I think the Ducks have done a pretty good job over the years, with some notable exceptions, of designing solid jerseys and having that look. So I like the orange color, and that the duck's eye, the look that duck has. I kind of like that. So we'll see. We'll see when it's officially unveiled. But I think it's a good move in general. How about you?
Yeah, I love the Mighty Ducks look. I think it's better. I am absolutely biased, and I think that the Flyers have the best use of orange in the league, and I think the Ducks orange is a little weird. But again, 100% biased, will admit that. But that being said, I think it could look really good with the Mighty Ducks look to it, and I would certainly consider buying a jersey if that's what they decide to do. Of course, the Utah jerseys were released as well in sort of the powder blue, black, and white look. And I think that they're trying to come up with a color code that's going to go with the eventual team name without saying what the eventual team name is, which leads me to believe that Yeti is exactly what's coming, because it feels like a very Yeti color combination. But what do you think?
It feels Yeti. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before. But I think Yeti very well could be the way they go. The color combination works. It's not my first choice necessarily if I were building my own team. But the one thing I can say confidently is that since these jerseys will only be the actual jerseys for 1 year, unless maybe if they stick with Utah HC as the permanent name, which I don't think they're going to do, these will be collector's items one way or the other. These are going to be a 1 year jersey, and then we'll have probably the same colors, but a different logo or theme attached to it in year 2.
Yeah, and one thing that is interesting about them is they're the first Fanatics jerseys to have been released, which is, the big switchover that's happening this upcoming season. So we could see some additional new looks or slight adjustments from around the league.
Yeah, that's always a possibility. And I know there have been some people who have been less than thrilled with the Fanatics changeover from a quality standpoint, but we'll see what happens now when it becomes official.
Yeah, I think so. The quality side of things is what I'm most worried about. And especially, you saw what happened in baseball when they changed over, did not go well for them. But yeah, so I don't think there'll be major changes, again, because it's their first year and they want to make sure they can produce the jerseys kind of as is. But as they get into their time as the official jersey maker, new looks are absolutely going to be a big part of it. And I look forward to that. Look forward to tonight's game and seeing how that turns out. And if we have another game to talk about Monday, where you will be back, Gil, talking with hosts from around the league. I'm guessing Florida and Edmonton will be a big part of those conversations, as well as a third team to be named later. And we'll be back next Friday to give our last look pre-draft, which will be pretty exciting as well. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great weekend, everyone.